today joining us is Shane Howell, who is the past president of HERMAB, and with him is Paula Walcott, vice president of Human Resources. Good morning, both of you.
Good morning, Pearson. Good morning, Barbados.
Indeed, thanks so much for joining us. Now, we're talking a big subject today, Shane boy. We're talking about succession planning, and I know a number of people have heard that term over and over again. It's bandied around in organizations, and somehow it never seems to get done for a lot of people. It's not clearly articulated and the like. So, Paula, I'll start with you. Can you give me the definition? What is succession planning?
Sure, thanks, Pearson. Succession planning really is a process that you would go through to identify which roles within the organization are business critical. What are your mission critical roles that if there's any disruption at all, your business would be in trouble or you would be at risk. Once you identify those roles, next you need to look and see, well, what's my talent pipeline? Who are the people available to fill those roles to allow us to minimize that risk? And that's really what it is in a nutshell. It's about being able to deal with any sudden departures or planned departures from your organization that could impact your operations.
I guess a little scary, because when you begin to define it like that, you'll think one would automatically think all roles are important, but when you say the mission critical ones, you're thinking I could dispense of all the others, and that's not necessarily what we're talking about here at all. But we're talking about continuity, the continuity of the business in the event that for whatever reason either a person dies or leaves, or the business is disrupted in some kind of way. And so, Shane, why should businesses really do this? Why should we engage in succession planning?
All right, so if you look at succession planning, sort of like imagine that you were going for a country drive. You would ensure that you had enough gas in the vehicle, enough fuel in the vehicle before you went off on that journey in the event that you didn't have a gas station on road. That is a form of risk management. You're essentially managing the risk for that journey. A business operates in the same way. It has a particular destination, it has a course that it wants to go on, and it needs to ensure, as Paula said before, that there is minimal risk, and risk in the form of people and any disruption that people can cause, again, whether planned or unplanned. So for the business, it's critical to have that pool of talent available to fill those roles. So some of the immediate benefits, therefore, would be reduce recruitment costs, because if you're bringing a person from outside, one, you have the lag time you fill in that, because bringing a person from outside takes a bit more time. It's more expensive to bring persons from the outside. You also have a situation where for the business internally, persons are motivated and more engaged if they think they have a future in the business. So we talk a lot about employee engagement. If you want your persons to be more engaged, to be more productive, if they believe that they have a future, if they believe that they can grow within the organization, they're likely to give you more of what you as a business naturally want. Like I said, from a risk management standpoint, it means that you don't have to compromise your goals. You don't have to lose traction when you're trying to make progress on the strategy that you have in place for your organization. So ultimately, just from that brief response, I think you can garner that there are benefits to the business itself and not losing ground while moving towards its goals, but there are also benefits to the employees as well, where a business is practicing succession planning and doing so effectively.
So what are some of the steps to get to that point, though, in making this plan, Paula? Because, it's all well and good to say that I don't want to have a bit of a hiccup as I'm getting nearer to the gas station, simply because a tire went flat, somebody left me, and now I have to spend time trying to repair that little spot, and that time loss is valued. But how do we actually get this plan in place so that it becomes very effective in executing?
Sure. So if you search Google, you might be scared by what you find. But it really can be a simple process, as simple as determining first which roles. Once you get very clear about those roles, it's a good idea to put a success profile in place for each role that you've identified. It may be, depending on the size of your organization, that you can't deal with all of the roles at once. So then you want to prioritize which roles you're going to treat to first. Once you've identified which and you have a good sense of that, you then want to identify who. Who are the people available in the organization today that may be able to fill an immediate need or an interim need And then who are the persons that can fill those roles in a more long-term way? You want to determine how are you going to select those persons within your overall successor candidate pool or your talent pipeline. At the end of the day, you want to have an objective way of determining these persons because you don't want bias to creep in. You're still thinking about the overall business need and managing the risk. So it's important to do that as well. Once you've settled and you've come up with how you're going to select these persons and you have selected them, then you want to determine where their gaps are, if there are any, and what developmental opportunities you need to provide for them. Some of those opportunities may require going externally for training, etc., but some of them may be as simple as assigning them to other areas of the business so they can learn as they develop and grow.
It's an investment really in your future, but is it also a promise? Because the last thing you want to do is to commit to a promise and this person falls flat at some point in the journey.
Yeah, well, it's not necessarily a promise, and that's where transparency comes in. Because as Shay would have identified earlier, there are benefits to the employer and the employee. Anyone who is included within a succession plan and they've been identified as a candidate, they are developed. Any developmental opportunities they get are theirs. No one can extract that from them in the future. And once you're clear about what your plan looks like and what your framework is, for example, if you determine that at the end of the process, when roles become available, everyone in the pool who is suitable has to apply or be interviewed, then they will know that going in. So it's important to build transparency into the process.
So very clear, because the last thing you want is a person who feels buyer's remorse of some sort, where you told me that I was next in line. You told me and you gave me all these opportunities, and then when that opportunity arose, I was again overlooked. So you don't want to have that kind of buyer's remorse, do we, Shane? Where people feel as though you were just dangling the carrot because you just didn't want to lose me.
Yeah, definitely. And I believe actually that you had raised this maybe about 2 weeks ago when last we spoke, and the focus then was training and development, or
Yep.
learning and development. And yeah, you don't, as Paula rightfully said, it's really about transparency, it's about maintaining the trust that the employees have in you and having the process so that they want to participate. And Paula used the perfect word. She said candidate. You're a succession planning candidate, pretty much. So by candidate, it doesn't mean that you will inherit the position, but it means that you should have a higher probability because of what you've been exposed to, that, when that opportunity comes, you should be flying fairly high to make that transition.
A lot. Succession planning, is a size fits all types of businesses? Because some businesses are not as efficient as others or as large enough as others because they don't have the capacity to be able to do a lot of what you've described succession planning to be. But you also want us to know it's absolutely critical to the sustainability of my business. So for those who are in small, medium-sized enterprises, Shane, help us understand how they can really get this done so that it becomes a critical part of the sustainability of their company.
Okay, so if you were listening to Paula just now, who gave a fantastic outline of the program, sounds like, depending on how you heard it, it may have sounded intimidating. Depending on how you sounded and what your experience is, then you understand that it really isn't that complex. And so for a small organization, and let's say, for example, Paula had a mini mart, I had a mini mart. Paula's focus, and this is where it gets critical, Paula's focus is customer service and customer experience, but my focus for my mini mart is I just want to have things as cheap as possible for persons. Now, within that, we have similar businesses that look similar from the outside, but we have different focal points. Mine is to get things cheap. Paula's is to give the best service experience. So when we talk about critical positions within Paula's business, she can actually look at it and say, you know what, the floor manager, the floor supervisor is one of the most critical people because they are focused on making sure that customers get great service, the place looks clean, the shelves are well stocked. If we got little parking spaces that they're not getting abused, so that persons get the best service experience. In my business, I have a floor supervisor too. I have cashiers and so on, the same positions as Paula. But in mine, because my focus is on being, inexpensive, the positions for me that actually may be business critical or more business critical from a strategic standpoint would be my purchaser, because they need to be extremely skilled in finding the right, suppliers for me, and whoever is dealing with the distribution, getting the products in so that whatever distribution network is used gives me the best possible landed price. Same type of business, small business, both have business critical roles, but no, both have different business critical roles. So I say that to say that for any organization, you have to be able, as the leadership, to identify what is most important for you. And then from there, you can, once you know the rules and you know what, as Paula says, success looks like, you just got to determine, do I need to send persons to training? And actually, there's something from a L&D, from a learning and development
Mm-hmm.
standpoint, that we call the 70-20-10 principle, which goes against what a lot of people think. And it just says that 70% of your learning and the best learning comes from on the job itself.
Mm-hmm.
20% is from having like a coach or a mentor, and 10% is really just the training that we send you to. So all of that says the bulk of your ability to get people ready is just about giving them different experiences in the business and giving them feedback so they understand you did this really well or you could improve on this. That in itself is a fantastic form of development. So again, it's for everybody.
But besides, if I'm tiny, my business is relatively small. I've only just the 5 or so employees. Do I have sufficient coming down the pipeline, really, that can help me have an effective succession plan? Or it doesn't matter?
So technically speaking, and this is where unfortunately a lot of small businesses don't get past one generation. We hear
Mm.
that a lot. Your business doesn't get past the founder.
Yes.
And that is because we don't do sufficient succession planning. So yes, you have 5 people in your business, you're the leader of the organization. Depending on how you've been recruiting, there should be some person behind you that has a knowledge of what you know, has some knowledge, so that in the event that you're not there, this is where you can then take a vacation. This is where
Mm-hmm.
if you go up on sick leave, the business can still function. There should always be some person who can kind of do things in your absence. So I would say even in that business, yes. In some cases, if you don't have the internal talent, then it does mean that part of your plan is to identify and start making contact potentially with persons that you can bring into the organization should you exit, if you can't find that pool internally. So I would say the first stop to a large extent should be internal, but if you don't have it, or if strategically the business has to change a bit and everyone in the business kind of thinking the same or been doing the same, then it might make sense for you to look externally. So again, this is a business decision that has to be made based on certain factors that you as the leadership have to be able to address.
Yeah, it's mission critical indeed. And so, having developed a succession plan, Paula, should I tell all of my employees? And if I should, how do I tell them what that succession plan is?
Well, you need to actually tell them about the framework. So whatever that is for your business, whatever that looks like, whether it is every year in August, I'm going to look at the pool of persons I have, whatever it looks like in your space, you want to communicate what the overall framework is. Because in the absence of knowledge, people will make it up and they may actually err on the side of saying you don't have one. So you want to communicate at a high level what the overall plan is. But you also need to engage specifically with your managers, supervisors, team leads, the persons who are going to take responsibility, because while HR may drive this where HR exists, there are many organizations that don't have a dedicated HR person. So you want to engage with the people who are actually going to be responsible for developing others and growing the leaders behind them, or developing those persons within the organization who need to be able to step into your mission critical roles. You also need very specifically, in a more meaningful way, to engage with your successor candidates, whoever are the persons you've identified in your pipeline. This is absolutely important because if you're keeping your plan a secret or you've shared it with the entire organization, but you have not drilled down to actually engage with those persons, let's be fair, there are delays that happen in implementing. You may not get to the point where you start to develop them. But if you don't have a conversation with them, they may be looking at your competitor who has a plan in place. And your competitor may be doing what you should be doing and engaging directly. So you want to make sure that your communication plan doesn't stay at the high level, but you drill all the way down.
Sometimes you get a little bit hesitant to share the full plan with everybody simply because someone in the chain might feel, I should have been one of those candidates and somehow I was not pointed out. And so that creates a little bit of discomfort in the organization. How do you manage that?
Well, that's where crucial conversations come in. At the end of the day, once you're in a leadership position, a business ownership position, you need to be prepared to have those kinds of conversations. Remember that we encourage you to build a success profile for the role. So if there's someone in the organization who has not been included in your as a successor candidate, you want to have an honest conversation with them about what the success profile looks like and why they didn't fit that profile. And then if they hold their hand up and say, but I want to be, I always encourage people to work with the willing. So then you have a separate developmental path for that person. It may not necessarily lead them to a leadership role or one of your key positions, for example, in sales, dealing with large accounts, but they themselves will then feel engaged because you've had that conversation with them.
So we've had the conversation, Shayna. We've identified some people. They know who they are. And I know you've talked a bit about training, about cross training, and a whole host of other things. But what are some of the other strategies in developing that talent for the next stage, because they've been identified as the next in line?
Right. So following from that, and I actually use this example. Early in my career, I remember that my leader at the time, we were prepping a presentation to make to business ownership, and on the day of the presentation, I was told, when I had him ready for the presentation, thinking that my boss was going to make it, he said, "Well, you're the one making the presentation." I was pretty green at the time. I was shocked. Maybe it could have been done a bit differently. Maybe I could have gotten a bit more prep. He said, "You've been building this presentation. You've been working in the weeds. You understand it." And early on, that gave me exposure to senior leadership, and more so, it gave me visibility. It gave me an opportunity to actually start presenting at that level and for them to trust me. So when we talk about opportunities, we talk about those types of things as well. It is one thing to do the cross training. It's one thing, which is fundamental. So let me not seem as though I'm diluting that or discounting that. The training is critical, but the opportunities to actually do the work, the opportunities to make the presentation, to attend the board meetings, to engage persons at that level, to be part of the networking conversations, to attend events, to prepare the report, where you actually do the work and get put in the situation that preps you so that when the day comes, you don't have to walk in your first board meeting when you're promoted and suddenly be like, this sounded really good in theory, but it's a whole different experience now.
Yes.
So actually getting those practice opportunities are fundamental parts of how we can actually develop and expose persons to the role. Fill-in opportunities when persons go on vacation is a fantastic opportunity as well. But again, it goes back to not throwing people in at the deep end, which I think we've gotten comfortable to doing, but prepping them, giving them all the little steps so that when they get there, they're actually ready and it isn't intimidating and it doesn't turn them off from the actual role. Essentially, we don't set them up to fail, but we set them up for success.
It is so critical indeed that businesses actually begin now to start looking at this, because as we're aging out of the working force at the same time as well, but we need to have continuity plans in place. So succession planning steps right into this. So who's responsible? I know you say to me it drills down even to the supervisor level. Who is responsible for driving this entire process in any organization so that we do have a successful continuity plan? Paula?
Paula, you want to talk about it?
I was waiting on Shane to tackle that one. But the reality is that the business owner ultimately has a vested interest in ensuring the continuity of the business. In some organizations where you have an HR role or you have like an office manager role, someone who owns recruitment and onboarding and those kinds of roles, you may have that person also take some of the accountability for ensuring that there's a talent pipeline available. And the reality is every business owner, every HR person, every office manager, every supervisor should always have a recruitment on their mind. As you interact with people at other organizations and they fit the profile of what you need in your business, you should start to engage with these people. It's important to have a pipeline, not just internally, but have contacts externally. Because one of the challenges you may face is the time to fill roles if that departure happens suddenly. So it's something that needs to be owned not just by one person, but by everyone in the organization who has a responsibility for developing others. If the organization is small and all of those roles converge on the business owner, then the business owner has a responsibility to ensure that there's a pool of talent available.
So business owner watching, HR practitioner watching, those of you with small and medium-sized enterprises watching, you're thinking, oh my golly, this is so much. Don't panic, there's HERMAB. There's HERMAB available to assist you indeed. And so that organization is one to which you can turn if you have any questions, queries, or need of support or clarification on a few things. But there's membership to HERMAB as well. And I keep saying membership brings tremendous benefits. We have some excellent HR practitioners in HERMAB who are ready, once you're a member, to be able to go beyond most of what you perhaps would expect. And so I want to encourage you to head over to hermab.org and sign up. Become a member, and you don't necessarily have to be an HR person, but you just want to be able to upskill yourself in human resources as well. You can also have associate membership there as well. Shane and Paula, thank you so much. This has been quite a discussion. I like the idea. I hope that many people today who have not yet given thought to succession planning have been spurred to take action, or at least to begin the discussion within their organizations as to putting things in place. And if you need some assistance, again, HERMAB can help guide you in the process. So Shane Howell and Paula Walcott, thank you. All the best. Looking forward to seeing you guys again sometime soon.
Great. Thanks a lot,
Pearson.
Pearson.
You're very welcome. We've just been talking HR with HERMAB. Remember, succession planning is critical to any organization. If you are an employee and you need to know what your succession plan is in your organization, ask a question, get an answer, and let's see how it goes from there.